The champagne glass slipped from Victoria Hayes' trembling fingers, shattering against the polished marble floor of the Whitman Gallery. The sound echoed through the pristine space like a gunshot, causing every perfectly dressed head to turn in her direction. She stood frozen, her thrift store dress suddenly feeling like a costume in a play where she had forgotten her lines. Victoria had never belonged in places like this. The invitation had arrived by mistake, meant for Victoria Hayworth, the renowned sculptor whose studio sat 3 floors above Victoria's cramped apartment. But when the elegant cream envelope had slid under her door, she couldn't resist the temptation to peek into a world she had only dreamed of. Entering, the gallery buzzed with Manhattan's elite, their conversations flowing as smoothly as the expensive wine being served by waiters in crisp white jackets. Victoria clutched her small canvas purse tighter, wishing she could disappear into the abstract paintings that lined the walls. She had spent her last $20 on a cab fare to get here, hoping desperately that tonight might change everything. "Are you injured?" The voice came from behind her, deep and surprisingly gentle. Victoria turned to find herself face to face with a man who seemed to command the room's attention without effort. He was tall, with dark hair that looked professionally styled despite its casual appearance, and eyes the color of storm clouds. His suit probably cost more than Victoria made in 3 months. "I'm fine," she whispered, kneeling to pick up the larger pieces of glass. "I'm so sorry. I can pay for it." "Please don't," he said, crouching beside her. "You'll cut yourself." He gestured to a nearby waiter who appeared instantly with a small broom and dustpan. "Thomas, could you handle this, please?" Victoria watched as the mess disappeared efficiently, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. She could feel the stares of other guests, their whispered comments floating through the air like sharp little knives. This was exactly why she didn't belong here. "Nathan Cross," the man said, extending his hand as they both stood. His grip was firm, but not overpowering, and Victoria noticed calluses on his fingers that seemed out of place for someone so obviously wealthy. "Victoria Hayes," she replied, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "And I really should go. I'm clearly not supposed to be here." Something flickered in Nathan's eyes, a recognition that made Victoria's stomach flutter with unexpected nervousness. "Actually," he said, his voice carrying a weight she couldn't quite understand, "I think you might be exactly where you're supposed to be." Before Victoria could ask what he meant, a sharp crack split the air. She turned in horror to see that her purse had knocked against a small painting on the wall during her nervous fidgeting. The canvas now sported a thin line running diagonally across what appeared to be an original work by someone important. The gallery fell silent. Victoria felt the blood drain from her face as she stared at the damaged artwork. The price tag beside it showed a number with more zeros than she could comprehend. Her entire life savings wouldn't cover even a fraction of its value. "Oh God," she breathed, backing away from the painting as if distance might somehow undo the damage. "Oh God, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I can't pay for this. I don't have any money. I shouldn't have come here." The words tumbled out in a panicked rush as Victoria's carefully constructed composure finally crumbled. She had spent years perfecting the art of appearing fine when everything was falling apart. But this was beyond her ability to fake. This was catastrophe. "Breathe," Nathan said quietly, stepping between Victoria and the growing crowd of onlookers. His body blocked most of their view, creating a small pocket of privacy in the public space. "Just breathe." Victoria tried to follow his instruction, but her lungs felt tight and small. She was going to be sued, arrested. Her tiny apartment would be taken away, along with all her art supplies and the half-finished paintings that represented months of work. The life she had fought so hard to build would disappear overnight. The painting, she managed to say through her panic. "I've ruined it." Nathan glanced over his shoulder at the damaged canvas, and something unexpected happened. He smiled. Not the polite, practiced smile she had seen him wear while greeting other guests, but something genuine and almost amused. "That painting," he said, "turning back to Victoria has been irritating me for months. The artist is pretentious and overpriced. You might have actually improved it." Victoria stared at him, confusion replacing some of her panic. "But it must be worth a fortune. It is, Nathan confirmed. Which is exactly the problem. Sometimes the most expensive things are worth the least, and the most valuable things cost nothing at all. He looked at Victoria with those storm-gray eyes, and she felt as if he could see straight through all her carefully constructed defenses to the truth underneath. She was broke, desperate, and completely out of place. But instead of judgment, she found something else in his expression. Understanding, perhaps, or recognition of something familiar. "Tell me," Nathan said, his voice dropping lower so only she could hear. "What kind of art do you create?" The question caught Victoria off guard. In all her panic about the painting, she hadn't expected anyone to actually want to know about her work. "I paint," she said hesitantly. "Mostly portraits, but nothing like this." She gestured at the sleek, expensive artwork surrounding them. "Show me," Nathan said simply. Victoria blinked in surprise. "What? Your work? I'd like to see it." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, pressing it into her hand. The cardstock was thick and expensive, embossed with silver lettering that read, "Nathan Cross, Cross Technologies. Come to my office tomorrow evening. Bring some of your paintings." "I don't understand," Victoria said, staring at the card. "Why would you want to see my work?" "And what about the painting I damaged?" Nathan's smile returned, softer this time, but no less intriguing. "Consider it handled. As for your work, let's just say I have a feeling about you, Victoria Hayes, and in my experience, those feelings are usually worth investigating." He turned to leave, then paused and looked back at her one more time. "Oh, and Victoria, next time you crash a party, try not to destroy the art. It tends to make people nervous." With that, he disappeared into the crowd, leaving Victoria standing alone beside the damaged painting, clutching his business card like a lifeline and wondering if she had just experienced a miracle or made a deal with the devil. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of worried glances and whispered conversations. But no security guards came to arrest her, and no lawyers appeared with papers to serve. Whatever Nathan Cross had meant by handled, it seemed he had been as good as his word. Victoria left the gallery as the last guests were departing. Stepping out into the cool Manhattan night, with her head spinning and her heart racing, in her pocket, Nathan's business card felt warm against her palm. Full of possibilities she didn't dare name, she had no idea that her life had just changed forever, or that the collision that had brought them together was only the beginning of something neither of them had seen. Coming tomorrow evening couldn't come fast enough. Victoria spent the entire next day pacing her tiny studio apartment, alternating between staring at Nathan's business card and reorganizing her paintings for the 100th time. The address led to one of Manhattan's most prestigious buildings, a gleaming tower that scraped the sky and housed some of the world's most powerful companies. Cross Technologies occupied the top 15 floors. And as Victoria rode the elevator to the 42nd floor, she watched the city shrink below her through the glass walls. Her reflection stared back from the polished metal doors, and she barely recognized herself. She had chosen her best dress, a simple black number she had sewn herself, and pulled her auburn hair back in a neat bun. In her arms she carried a portfolio containing her 5 best paintings. Wrapped carefully in brown paper, the elevator opened to reveal a reception area that looked like something from a magazine. Everything was sleek lines and expensive materials, from the marble floors to the abstract sculptures positioned around the waiting area. A woman behind a curved desk looked up as Victoria approached. Her smile, professional but warm. "Victoria Hayes," Victoria said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I have an appointment with Mr. Cross, of course. Miss Hayes, he's expecting you." The receptionist stood and led Victoria down a hallway lined with floor-to-ceiling windows. "Can I offer you anything to drink?" "Water would be nice," Victoria replied, her throat suddenly dry. They stopped at a set of double doors made of dark wood and frosted glass. The receptionist knocked once before opening them. "Miss Hayes is here. Mr. Cross. Send her in." "Janet, thank you." Victoria stepped into an office that took her breath away. The space was enormous, with windows on 2 walls offering a panoramic view of the city. But what struck her most wasn't the expensive furniture or the impressive technology displays. It was the art. The walls were covered with paintings from different periods and styles. Some she recognized as works by famous artists. Others that were clearly from unknown creators, but displayed with equal care. Nathan stood behind his desk, and Victoria was surprised to see that he looked tired. His usually perfect appearance was slightly rumpled, his tie loosened, and there were dark circles under his eyes that she hadn't noticed the night before. "You came," he said, and there was genuine relief in his voice. "You thought I wouldn't." Victoria set her portfolio on the chair across from his desk and looked around the room. "This is incredible. I've never seen a collection like this outside of a museum." Nathan followed her gaze to a particularly striking piece near the window. "Most people who visit this office only notice the view or the technology. You're the first person in years to comment on the art." Victoria walked closer to examine a small painting that seemed oddly familiar. It was a street scene painted in oils with a technique that reminded her of her own work. "This looks like Lower Manhattan," she said. "But from maybe 20 years ago?" 30 years ago, actually," Nathan said, joining her by the painting. "I bought it from a street artist when I was 12 years old. Spent my entire allowance on it." My father was furious. There was something in his tone that made Victoria look at him more closely. Why was he angry? Nathan was quiet for a moment, his fingers drumming against his leg in a nervous gesture that seemed at odds with his usual composure. He said it was a waste of money. That art was for people who couldn't do anything useful with their lives. Victoria felt a sharp pang of recognition. She had heard similar words from her own family when she had announced her intention to pursue art instead of a practical career. "But you kept it anyway." "I kept it anyway," Nathan confirmed. "And I've been buying art ever since. Not because it's a good investment, though. Some of it is. Because it reminds me that there are people in the world who see beauty where others see nothing worth noticing." The comment hung in the air between them, and Victoria felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to shift. She had expected Nathan to be like every other wealthy person she'd encountered, interested in art only as a status symbol or a tax write-off. But there was something genuine in the way he looked at the paintings. Something that spoke of real appreciation rather than mere ownership. "You wanted to see my work?" Victoria said. Returning to her portfolio, she began unwrapping the paintings, her hands steady despite her racing heart. The first painting she revealed was a portrait of Mrs. Chen, the elderly woman who ran the corner market near Victoria's apartment. Victoria had painted her during the golden hour when the afternoon sun streamed through the shop window, illuminating the lines on her face and the kindness in her eyes. Nathan studied the painting in silence, and Victoria found herself holding her breath. She had poured everything into this piece, all her technical skill and emotional understanding, trying to capture not just Mrs. Chen's appearance, but her essence. "She looks like someone with stories," Nathan said finally. "Important stories that most people never bother to hear." Victoria felt her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. She survived the Cultural Revolution in China, came to America with nothing, and built a life from scratch. She works 16-hour days and still finds time to slip candy to kids who can't afford it. "And you see all of that in her face," Nathan said. Not a question, but a statement of understanding. Victoria nodded and unwrapped the second painting. This one showed a young man she had met at a homeless shelter where she volunteered, captured in a moment of quiet dignity as he read a book someone had donated. The third was a mother and child waiting for a bus. The fourth, an elderly jazz musician playing on a street corner. Each painting told a story of ordinary people living extraordinary lives. And Victoria watched Nathan's face as he examined each one. She was used to people looking at her work with polite disinterest or condescending praise. But Nathan looked at each painting like he was meeting the subjects personally, his expression growing more thoughtful with each piece. "They're all people others would walk past without seeing," he said when she had revealed the last painting. "But you make them impossible to ignore." "That's the point," Victoria said quietly. "Everyone has a story worth telling. Most people just don't take the time to look." Nathan turned away from the paintings and walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. Victoria watched him stare out at the city, wondering what he was thinking. The silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but heavy with unspoken thoughts. "I have a proposition for you," Nathan said finally, not turning around. "But first, I need to tell you something about myself. Something that might change how you see me." Victoria felt her pulse quicken. "What is it?" Nathan turned back to face her, and for the first time since she had met him, he looked vulnerable. The confident businessman facade had cracked, revealing something raw underneath. "I'm dying," he said simply. "Brain tumor. The doctors give me maybe 6 months." The words hit Victoria like a physical blow. She sank into the chair beside her portfolio, her mind reeling. "Are you sure? Have you gotten a second opinion?" "I've gotten 4 opinions," Nathan said with a bitter smile. "They all agree. The tumor is inoperable and aggressive. I've known for 2 months." Victoria stared at him, trying to reconcile this information with the man who had seemed so powerful and in control just moments before. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want to commission you to paint my portrait," Nathan said. "But not the kind of portrait other artists have done. I don't want something that makes me look important or powerful. I want something that shows who I really am underneath all of this." He gestured at his expensive office and suit. "I want you to see me the way you saw Mrs. Chen. And that homeless man and all the other people in your paintings. I want you to find the story in my face that I've spent my whole life trying to hide." Victoria felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. The request was deeply personal, more intimate than anything she had ever been asked to create. "Why me? You could hire any artist in the world, because you're the first person who has ever looked at my art collection and seen the art instead of the price tags," Nathan said. "Because you crashed into my world and reminded me that there are still people who create beauty for its own sake. Because when you looked at that damaged painting last night, you didn't see dollar signs. You saw something precious that had been hurt." He walked back to his desk and pulled out a contract from the top drawer. "I'll pay you $500,000 to paint my portrait. Half now, half when it's finished. The only condition is that you paint me honestly. No flattery, no false heroism. Just the truth of who I am." Victoria's breath caught in her throat. $500,000 would change her life completely. She could quit her 3 part-time jobs, move to a real studio, buy quality supplies, maybe even show her work in galleries. It was more money than she had ever dreamed of having. But as she looked at Nathan's face, she realized the money wasn't what mattered. What mattered was the trust he was placing in her, the faith that she could see him clearly enough to capture something true. He was offering her not just financial freedom, but the chance to create something meaningful with someone who understood the value of art beyond its market price. "There's one more thing," Nathan said, his voice softer now. "I'd like you to paint it here in this office. I want to spend whatever time I have left around someone who sees the world the way you do. Someone who looks for the beauty instead of the bottom line." Victoria stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the growing dusk. Below them, millions of people were living their lives, each with their own stories, their own hopes and fears and dreams. She thought about Mrs. Chen and the homeless man and all the other faces she had painted, each one a reminder that every life had value and dignity. When she turned back to Nathan, she found him watching her with those storm-gray eyes, waiting for her answer with a patience that spoke of a man who had learned not to take time for granted. "I'll paint your portrait," Victoria said, "but not for the money. I'll do it because everyone deserves to be seen clearly at least once in their life. Even billionaire tech executives." Nathan's smile was different this time. Not the polished version she had seen him wear in public, but something genuine and grateful, and maybe a little bit hopeful. "Thank you," he said, simply as Victoria gathered her paintings and prepared to leave. She realized that she had just agreed to do more than paint a portrait. She had agreed to spend the next few months getting to know a man who was facing his own mortality, to find the humanity beneath the wealth and power, to create something beautiful from something tragic. It wasn't the commission she had expected when she walked into his office. But as she stepped back into the elevator and watched the city lights spread out below her, she knew it was exactly the work she was meant to do. 3 weeks into the portrait sessions, Victoria had established a rhythm. Every evening, after finishing her part-time job at the coffee shop, she would take the subway to Nathan's office building, riding the elevator to the 42nd floor with her easel, paints. In growing understanding of the man she was trying to capture on, Canvas Nathan had cleared a corner of his office for her to work, positioning a comfortable chair near the window where the natural light was best. He would sit there for 2 hours each evening, sometimes talking, sometimes reading, occasionally taking calls that couldn't wait. Victoria had learned to paint around his life, capturing him not in a formal pose, but in the quiet moments between meetings and decisions. The portrait was unlike anything she had ever created. With each session, she discovered new layers to Nathan's character, details that contradicted the public image of the ruthless businessman. She painted the calluses on his hands that came from building computers in his garage as a teenager. She captured the way his eyes softened when he talked about the scholarship program his company funded for underprivileged students. She found the scar on his chin from a childhood accident and the slight stoop in his shoulders from years of carrying weight that wasn't entirely physical. "You're making me look human, Nathan," said one evening, studying the work in progress. "I'm not sure my board of directors would approve." Victoria smiled, cleaning her brush on the palette. "Maybe your board of directors doesn't know you as well as they think they do." "Maybe they don't," Nathan agreed. He was quiet for a moment, watching Victoria organize her supplies with the methodical care she brought to everything she did. "Can I ask you something personal?" "You're paying me to stare at you for hours while you sit perfectly still," Victoria said. "I think personal questions come with the territory." Nathan laughed, sound Victoria had grown to appreciate over their weeks together. "Why art? You're obviously intelligent enough to have done anything. Why choose something so uncertain?" Victoria paused in her cleaning, considering how to answer. It was a question she had been asked countless times by family members, guidance counselors, and well-meaning friends who worried about her impractical career choice. "Do you remember being a child and seeing something beautiful for the first time?" she asked finally. "Maybe a sunset or a butterfly or your mother's face when she was really happy about something?" Nathan nodded. "I remember thinking that I wanted to hold on to that feeling forever," Victoria continued. "Not just remember it, but actually preserve it somehow so I could share it with other people. That's what painting does for me. It lets me take moments that might otherwise disappear and make them permanent." She gestured toward the portrait taking shape on her easel. "When I paint someone's portrait, I'm not just recording what they look like. I'm trying to capture who they are in that specific moment, what they're thinking and feeling and hoping for. It's like taking a photograph of someone's soul." Nathan was quiet for a long time after that. Victoria wondered if she had said too much. But when she looked at his face, she saw something she hadn't expected: understanding, recognition. As if she had put words to something he had felt, but never been able to express. "My father never understood that," Nathan said finally. "He saw art as decoration or investment, never as truth-telling." "What about your mother?" Victoria asked gently. Nathan's expression grew distant. "She died when I was 7, cancer, but I remember her taking me to museums and art galleries when I was small. She would stand in front of paintings for what felt like hours, just looking. I used to get impatient, but she would tell me that every painting was a window into another person's world, and that if I looked carefully enough, I might learn something important." Victoria felt her heart clench with sympathy. "She sounds like she was a wise woman." "She was," Nathan said. "I think she would have liked you." The comment hung in the air between them, more intimate than anything either had shared before. Victoria felt a warmth spread through her chest, followed immediately by a stab of sadness. Nathan was dying. Every conversation they had, every shared moment, was borrowed time that would end too soon. Over the following weeks, their evening sessions became the highlight of Victoria's day. Nathan would tell her stories about building his company from nothing, about the mistakes he had made and the people who had helped him along the way. Victoria shared her own dreams and fears, her struggles as an artist in a world that didn't always value creativity, her hope that someday her work might make a real difference in people's lives. She learned that Nathan had been engaged once, to a woman named Jennifer who had loved his money more than she loved him. She told him about David, the boyfriend who had convinced her to give up art for something more practical, then left her anyway when she refused to change. They talked about loneliness and ambition and the price of success, finding common ground in their shared understanding of what it meant to be misunderstood. The portrait progressed slowly, each brushstroke deliberate and considered. Victoria painted Nathan's intelligence in the set of his jaw, his hidden kindness in the curve of his mouth, his mortality in the shadows beneath his eyes. It was becoming her masterpiece, but more than that. It was becoming a collaboration between artist and subject that transcended the usual boundaries of such relationships. One evening in early December, Nathan arrived at the office looking more tired than usual. His usual composure seemed strained, and Victoria noticed he was moving more carefully than before. "Are you feeling all right?" she asked as he settled into his chair by the window. "Just a headache," Nathan said. But Victoria could see it was more than that. The tumor was progressing, stealing pieces of him day by day. They worked in companionable silence that evening, Victoria adding final touches to the background while Nathan read reports and answered emails. But as the session was ending, Nathan suddenly spoke. "I need to ask you something," he said, his voice serious. "And I need you to promise me you'll consider it carefully before you answer." Victoria set down her brush and turned to face him fully. "What is it?" Nathan stood and walked to his desk, pulling out a document that looked official and important. "This is my will," he said. "I had my lawyers draw up a new version last week." Victoria felt her stomach clench with dread. She didn't want to think about Nathan's will, about a world where he no longer existed. "I'm leaving you everything," Nathan said simply. "The company, the art collection, this building, all of it." Victoria stared at him in shock, her mind struggling to process what he had just said. "That's impossible. You can't leave me everything. We've known each other for a month." 6 weeks, Nathan corrected with a slight smile. "And yes, I can. It's my money, my company. I can leave it to whoever I choose. But why?" Victoria's voice came out as barely a whisper. "You have family, friends, business partners who have worked with you for years." Nathan shook his head. "My family consists of a father who hasn't spoken to me since I refused to take over his manufacturing company, and a sister who calls twice a year to ask for money. My friends are mostly business associates who wouldn't notice I was gone until their stock prices dropped, and my business partners will be fine. They're all wealthy enough to retire comfortably." He walked back to stand in front of Victoria, his gray eyes intense and serious. "You're the only person I've met in years who sees value in things beyond their price tags. You understand that wealth is meaningless unless it's used to create something beautiful or help someone who needs it." Victoria felt tears burning behind her eyes. "Nathan, I can't accept this. It's too much. I wouldn't know what to do with that kind of money." "You'd figure it out," Nathan said with quiet confidence. "You'd use it to help people, to support other artists, to make the world a little more beautiful. That's who you are." Victoria stood abruptly, pacing to the window and staring out at the city lights. The idea of inheriting Nathan's fortune was overwhelming and terrifying. She had spent her entire adult life struggling to pay rent and buy groceries, carefully budgeting every dollar. The thought of suddenly having more money than she could spend in several lifetimes made her feel dizzy. "There's one condition," Nathan continued, his voice gentle but firm. "I want you to finish the portrait. I want to know that someone will remember who I really was. Not just the public version, but the person you've gotten to know these past weeks. Promise me you'll finish it." Victoria turned back to him, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. "Of course I'll finish it, but not because of the money. Because you deserve to be remembered truly." Nathan smiled, the expression transforming his whole face. "That's exactly why I know I'm making the right choice." They stood looking at each other across the office. Artist and patron, two people who had found an unexpected connection in the shadow of approaching loss. Victoria realized that somewhere in the past 6 weeks, she had stopped thinking of Nathan as just a client. He had become a friend, a confidant, maybe something more that she was afraid to name. "There's something else," Nathan said softly. "Something I need you to know before you decide whether to accept the inheritance." Victoria wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "What?" "I'm in love with you," Nathan said, the words simple and honest. "I know the circumstances are complicated, and I know the timing is terrible. But I needed you to know. Not because I expect anything in return, but because you've given me something I thought I'd lost forever. You've made me feel human again." Victoria's breath caught in her throat. She had felt something growing between them during their sessions, a connection that went beyond artist and subject. But she had convinced herself it was just the intensity of the situation, the strange intimacy of spending so much time studying someone's face and trying to capture their essence. "Nathan," she whispered. "Not sure what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Nathan said quickly. "I just wanted you to know. You've made these last weeks the happiest I've been in years. Whatever you decide about the inheritance, that won't change." Victoria looked at the portrait on her easel, nearly complete now after weeks of careful work. She had painted Nathan's strength and his vulnerability, his intelligence and his kindness, his power and his mortality. She had painted him as he truly was, and in doing so, she had come to love not just the image she had created, but the man who had inspired it. The choice Nathan was asking her to make wasn't about money or inheritance. It was about whether she was brave enough to open her heart to someone she would lose, whether she could accept the gift of love even knowing it came with the certainty of loss. Victoria walked back to Nathan and took his hands in hers. They were warm and strong, with those calluses that spoke of work and determination and dreams built from nothing. "I love you too," she said, her voice steady despite her tears. "And yes, I'll accept the inheritance. Not because I want your money, but because I want to carry on the work you've started. I want to use whatever you leave me to help people the way you helped me." Nathan pulled her into his arms then, holding her close as the city lights twinkled beyond the windows. Victoria pressed her face against his chest and listened to his heartbeat, strong and steady for now, precious beyond measure. They had maybe 4 months left together if the doctors were right. It wasn't long enough, would never be long enough, but it was what they had. And Victoria was determined to make every moment count, to love him fully and completely while she could, and to honor his memory by becoming the person he believed she could be. The portrait would be finished soon, capturing Nathan Cross not as a billionaire or a business leader, but as a man who had learned to see beauty in unexpected places and had chosen to share that vision with someone who understood its value. It would hang in Victoria's future office, a reminder of the love that had changed both their lives and the responsibility that came with unexpected gifts. Outside the windows, snow began to fall softly on Manhattan, covering the city in a blanket of white that made everything look new and clean and full of possibility. Victoria and Nathan stood together watching it fall. Two hearts that had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances, ready to make the most of whatever time they had left. The collision that had brought them together had indeed changed everything, just not in the way either of them had expected. Sometimes the best gifts came disguised as accidents, and sometimes the greatest love stories were the ones that ended too soon but burned bright enough to last forever.